Welcome everyone. Just wanted to give a little update here. I've been offline. Haven't streamed any videos for a couple of weeks, I think. So at this count, I didn't disappear. Well, I did briefly, but basically, I've just kind of been focusing. Oh, well, I had some non-channel related stuff to deal with, and I am a pretty busy person generally. I also, between the work that I do, as well as some coding I do on my own, as well as I'm also the president of my Strata Council, a condominium association, essentially, for those who aren't in BC. But basically, yeah, and so that's, and I'm the president of a Strata that's 141 units. It's a pretty sizable property, so there's a lot of day-to-day going on. I'm going to incorporate some of that into this channel as well. I think at some point, at least just for what I learn about how Strata's organized and how the provincial legislation, that sort of thing, just because I'm interested in this sort of stuff. But I'm going to talk about just kind of what I'm doing with the news stuff right now. Basically, I mean, I've been continuing doing my studies and watch the news every day. I've been doing a lot of research about sort of the different news networks as well as the countries that those networks cover, just to sort of familiarize myself with all this information, because I've basically, what I've done for myself is taken the news, the world global news, and sort of cranked it to 11. It's I'm getting like a fire hose stream of news every day. Just let me give you an example here. Here, let me switch over to my subscriptions panel here, and I'll just give you a show. Boy, my network's being a little slow, but please bear with me here. So yeah, as you can see here, I've got video coming up 30 seconds, a few minutes ago. I can stream down here a couple of hours. Like, I'm getting through my cache, and I'm only 4 hours ago. Like, literally, my news stream, basically, is kind of a monster right now. So that's one of the things I've had an issue with. Another issue I've had is with my live news channel. Actually, let me click on that as well. Let me go to my live news. While that's loading up, let me just sort of give you an idea here. So basically, I mean, I've been searching for news sources all around the world. I've been mostly successful in Europe and Africa, as well as Southeast Asia. And kind of, actually, really, Africa in many ways has been the richest, most diverse set of news that I can find. There is quite a lot in Europe as well, and of course the Middle East. There's not a whole lot of news in North America and South America, oddly enough. Certainly, as far as streaming news goes, the only 24-hour streaming channel that I can find is coming out of Venezuela. And it's very heavy on the propaganda. It's very anti-American too. But because of both of those things, it can be kind of interesting to watch every now and then. I'll usually pop onto that one every now and then just to sort of see what's going on. In Europe, let me zoom in a little here. France, of course, is France 24, and as well as a number of French language stations and whatnot put their content on YouTube, including a few that stream live, including France 24 being by far the best. Germany has Deutsche World News. Also, these are both state-run. Actually, France 24 might not be, but Germany, definitely Deutsche World News is state-run. Does some pretty good stuff. Does an English channel and a German channel. I tend to watch the English channel. I don't know German that well either. But I also find that with them, they're kind of, it's the same content in both channels, where France 24, actually, the English and French channels can be very different. Also, I'm getting stuff out of, some of the other smaller... I mean, Euronews covers basically all of Europe. Down in Africa, Kenya and Nigeria and South Africa are definitely the three biggest content producers on YouTube. you also get, so I've got basically 3 channels that I monitor out of Kenya. There's, I think, 2 or 3 channels out of Nigeria. I've got 1 out of Uganda, and a couple out of South Africa as well. All English channels. Some of them are streaming 24/7. In fact, 1 out of Kenya streams 24/7. I'll come back to that in a second. 1 out of Nigeria, 1 out of South Africa, and then Africa News, which I'm not sure. I don't know if where they're housed. I'd have to go Google them. But they cover all of Africa. And so generally, the Nigerian news will also cover some stuff in the local area, Kenya and Uganda, but primarily Kenya. We'll focus mostly on Kenya news, but again, they'll sort of cover African stuff as well. South Africa in particular tends to cover a lot of the rest of the continent more regularly than the others. Of course, in the Middle East, I-24 out of Israel is 24/7 that I'm watching. Also watching out of Qatar is where Al Jazeera broadcasts out of. I also watch a bit out of TRT World, which is out of Turkey, and they're the ones that stream 24/7. I actually watch a little bit out of Press TV out of Iran as well. Right now, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in Syria right now, so everybody in the area is covering it, and far better than most of the rest of the world, actually. But particularly along this part of the Syrian border, Turkey's been essentially crossed the border and has been doing military incursions into some of the towns around northwestern Syria, under the guise of Operation Olive Branch, which is probably one of the more ironic names or than I heard out there, because it's certainly not peaceful. But anyway, their argument is that they want to secure that border so they stop what they consider terrorist forces, which are Kurdish or a small ethnic minority, because they are represented in both in Turkey and in Syria, and so it's a very complicated situation. But anyway, so it's interesting seeing the different news sources coming out of there. India, there are a number of sources. I haven't gone into looking up those channels. There are a few. There's like 3 English ones, and there's a whole lot of non-English ones, of course, in several different languages. And I haven't gone to source exactly where they're coming from. I would expect Mumbai or New Delhi would be where you'd see some of the channels, especially the English ones. But yeah, that's something I haven't really explored too much. There's also, I found a 24/7 English channel coming out of South Korea as well, which is kind of interesting. It doesn't tend to be too heavy on the news side, in much the same way as I also found a channel recently out of Bahrain, which is just the tiny country next to Qatar, but it also tends to, I don't think I've ever seen any news coverage on that. It tends to be more general, wide audience kind of stuff, human interest. Yeah, so like I said, I've been covering a lot of the world. This part is incredibly well covered, less so here. Okay, let's see if this loaded up here. The other thing I had the issue with my live news is, and let me just start this up and let her start playing. I'll make sure to mute it when it comes up, just because I don't want to have to talk over it, but there we go. So one thing that I've noticed here is some of my live channels, when they stream, okay, here, sorry, I got audio bugging me here. So France 24, for example, Deutsche World News, Sky News, Euronews, a lot of the European ones, Bloomberg, ABC Australia, Al Jazeera, English. In fact, all this top group, and TRT World. So a lot of these first ones are 24-hour channels that stream uninterrupted 24/7. I never have to worry about them. I come on here, click the button, I can always watch the channel. When I get down into some of the smaller channels, especially some of the African channels, such as ANN, African News Network out of South Africa, Africa Business News, to a lesser degree channels, I don't. TVC is fairly new for me. I don't know too much about that one. KTN, in fact, you can see right here, KTN and Citizen TV. You see there's a time on here as opposed to these, which is just the video thumbnail. So what this means is this is not live. Essentially, this file has terminated, and they've gone on to stream on a new video stream. So essentially, on a somewhat regular basis, a lot of the channels I've been dealing with switch their video stream file. So the URL stops working and I have to go and find the new file. And this is, I was doing this on a daily basis for a while, and it just became really, it's just time intensive, it's repetitive. And those two things are automatic clues for me to try and automate the process. So a lot of what I've been doing this last week has been learning the YouTube data API, and I'm going to do another video on that as well and show you what I did. But essentially, I'm trying to create an automated process that will scan this playlist on a regular schedule. Anytime it detects that one of the video files is no longer live, it's going to go onto the other channel where it came from, find the new live feed, and swap it out on the playlist so that I don't have to do this manual process. So anyway, like I said, that's been a lot of the focus that I've been doing this, especially this last week, has been on sort of the behind the scenes stuff. And so that's part of the reason why I haven't done any video for the last little while, is because I just haven't had the time to focus on creating content when I've been sort of doing stuff behind the scenes. Anyway, that stuff is very close to done. I'm just working out some minor bugs. Once I get that done, I'll do a special video on that and show you, talk about the YouTube data API, just because that's another interesting aspect about information. And I guess this channel is about information of all sorts. This can include news and media. It can also include governments and political information and political data in particular, but it also includes things like social media and personal information. I want to try and talk about all three of these areas, both about protecting yourself and also how governments work and how they could share their information or use their information in better ways, and the same thing with media, about how news could do a better job of using the internet to create new types of news content, as opposed to just regurgitating this old broken process that's really showing its age now and is perilously close to breaking in some countries. So and in fact, that might lead me back to I'm going to do another video this week, I think, on Kenya, just because there's been some interesting political developments coming out of there, and there's not a lot of coverage around elsewhere. So I think I might cover that a little bit. I'll probably do something on Syria as well, just to sort of give an overview of the situation from my understanding and try and provide some links to relevant stuff that might be interesting. I'd also want to do, I sort of, the other thing I was thinking about over this last little while was I want to, as I build this, what I'm looking at doing is starting to create a bit of a repository of news for geographically linked. So what I'd like to do is start collecting news country by country, so news sources that are online, and for the product primarily I'm going to start with just YouTube as the focus. So I'm just going to collect YouTube news organizations that are present on YouTube, but as this goes on, I may roll that out to a larger scope, but just to try and keep the scope in check and in control, I'm going to focus purely on YouTube. But that said, there are actually some interesting smaller news sources for specific countries, and I'm going to start, I think, I'll probably work my way around North America first. So I'll get Canada and United States. They're pretty easy to do. Mexico, and then the Caribbean, the Central America, I'm going to definitely try and cover. Especially, I mean, Central America, these are all individual countries, and most of them have their own news media. And a lot of them are on YouTube, although some of them don't post all that often. So I'm going to cover some of that. Then I'll try and go through the rest of the world. I don't know. We'll see what sort of order I do, but that's kind of what I'm going to do. And then once I start collecting that information, I might actually start using my YouTube data API and hook it into a mapping engine and try and make an actual visual map and a website interface that people could use. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. I don't want to make this too long, but just basically wanted to say I'm still working. I've just been kind of focusing on some behind the scenes stuff and some other areas of my life. But I'll be back with some more regular content. I should get more regular this week, and I'm gonna, like, my goal, I guess it's more of an aspiration. I'd like to get daily content up here, but pragmatically, it's not gonna happen it's not gonna happen immediately. So just ask you to bear with me as I sort of get into the ritual and the habit of doing this, and as I develop this process. It's gonna be an interesting journey for sure. Anyway, thank you very much. I'll log off here, but thanks again, and I will talk to you next time.